And well, getting you all that has been happening at Davos, apart from the snow and the sub-zero temperatures, Greenland has little in common with the Swiss Alps. But today, the future of that Arctic island is hanging over Davos and the future global order. As world leaders and corporate titans gather at the World Economic Forum, because this week in Davos, it's not just about global economy or climate change or technology. It is about U.S. President Donald Trump's plans for Greenland. Trump is arriving in Switzerland with the largest American delegation ever, determined to project what his team calls Team USA and what much of Europe is seeing as disruption on a global scale. Donald Trump, who returns to Davos in person for the first time since 2020, is already dominating the agenda before he has even landed there. Overnight, he has unleashed a barrage of posts and threats that have left European capitals scrambling. He's reiterated his intention to take over Greenland, which is a sovereign autonomous territory of Denmark, calling it imperative for national and world security, and declaring that there can be no going back. He posted AI-generated images of himself planting the American flag on Greenland's territory, calling it U.S. territory established 2026. This even as American and Danish officials had agreed to keep the talks private and off social media. Not only this, the American president attacked the United Kingdom as well, mockingly calling it a brilliant ally over plans to hand sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, and cited that the decision is yet another reason why Greenland must be acquired. He's threatened France with 200% tariffs on wine and champagne. He has lashed out personally at President Emmanuel Macron and leaked what he claimed were private messages from Macron and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte discussing his policy moves. Trump also says that he has agreed to meetings with various parties in Davos to discuss Greenland. Today, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has vowed a united and unflinching response, warning that tariff threats and economic coercion could plunge American allies into a dangerous downward spiral. She's also announced plans for massive European investment in Greenland while offering cooperation with the U.S. on Arctic security. France, meanwhile, is pushing back diplomatically.
When it comes to the security of the Arctic region, Europe is fully committed. And we share the objectives of the United States in this regard.
President Macron has offered to host a G7 meeting in Paris immediately after Davos, inviting Denmark, Ukraine, and even Russia on the sidelines to address the Greenland crisis. Behind the scenes, Europe is weighing countermeasures. An emergency EU summit is scheduled later this week in Brussels, as European leaders confront what many are calling one of the gravest crises in transatlantic ties in years. And this is no longer just political markets that are reacting. Remember, equities across Asia and Europe slid sharply on fears of a US-EU trade war. Gold and silver have surged to record highs as investors rush to safety. Analysts warn that if this standoff escalates, volatility will not stay contained. A public stress test of the NATO's unity is something that the markets are not built to absorb. We've got reporters on the ground who have been getting us all of these updates. Let's go across to them. I'm right now joined by Assistant Editor for Foreign Affairs, Siddhant Sibal. He's joining us from Davos. He's been tracking all the updates there. Siddhant, all eyes, of course, at the World Economic Forum are on Donald Trump's anticipated visit. His team, which is going to be the largest ever, is of course going to be pitching for US businesses. But more than that, the entire focus of the world is now centering around the kind of war that is playing out between Europe and America. As far as Davos is concerned, what are you hearing there? What are people talking about as far as Trump coming there is concerned?
Well, it's all about Trump, and this is the main road where I am standing. And tomorrow, perhaps it will be even difficult to stand here as US President will be here. But earlier today, we heard the European leaders EU's Ursula von der Leyen and other leaders, including the Chinese representative, all pitching for a rules-based international order, fair trade, free trade, and worried about Donald Trump, what he has in store during his address. He has given a lot of hints, the red lines he has drawn on the sand, perhaps, when it comes to Greenland, tariffs. And that is something that is worrying European capital. Whatever happens here in Davos tomorrow is going to decide in many ways the fate of Europe and, of course, the fate of the world as well. Not only just the focus on his address, but Thursday will be important in terms of the announcement or the signing of the so-called Board of Peace on Gaza. The charter will be signed. Now, who will be attending that meeting is the big question. There are controversies over the need of the Board of Peace. Is it sidelining the UN's main mandate? And this is something concerning for leaders like the French President Emmanuel Macron. So several things on the display, on the play here in Davos. But on the ground, there is concern over what Donald Trump is going to say and do here tomorrow when he addresses the gathering.
Absolutely, Siddhant. You know, what he says will also shape how European leaders respond to America and its threats. But at the moment, we've got a series of leaders, whether it's the EU Commission chief, Ursula von der Leyen, or the French President Emmanuel Macron. Earlier yesterday, we saw British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. They're all standing in unity against Trump's threat. And there is a lot of talk about whether there's going to be trade war or military action. What are you hearing there at Davos? What are people thinking of? Will there be a potential military war, or it's going to be just a deep trade war between America and its European allies, which has never been seen before?
Well, to quote the EU chief, unflinching response is something that European Union is looking at. But one thing is for clear, that in decades, the cross-Atlantic relationship has seen its biggest stress test. And in this stress test, it is clear that Europe is looking to come up with a new independent Europe, something that the EU chief outlined, and they're seeing it as an opportunity as well. So far, the order which was there between US and Europe was built on the outcomes of World War II. But Donald Trump has given a shock, and this is something that is shaking up things.
All right, Siddhant, thanks very much for joining us at the moment. We'll keep coming back to you for the latest.